specifically like people like Lincoln. I agree with your assessment, and I think it is kind of psychologically useful to, on the one hand, acknowledge that yes, Lincoln, for instance, he was clearly a racist, but on the other hand, isn't there something, to go back to the idea of greatness? Isn't there something great about a human being who could simultaneously be racist, but also say, you know what? What if in some way I think that I might be wrong? What if my racist feelings should be superseded by the idea that we need to get rid of slavery? That's a separate question, right?
That,
Uh,
that,
yeah.
that's what Cornell West, Dr. West said when we did the
Mm-hmm.
interview. You just have to be very impressed by the personal transformation, which seems to have been authentic. I mean, there is a line. I don't have it. Let me see if I could. What's that guy's? Oh, yeah. I'm going to just read one line, if you'll forgive me. One sentence. It's not mine. I'm not promoting my book. I'm promoting Abraham Lincoln, which is something. It's a different order. So on page 303, fortunately, I have a name index, which I created. Abraham Lincoln gives the second inaugural, okay? The speech for the second inaugural, very short. Even the Gettysburg Address is very short. You'd be very surprised. I thought it was a very long document until I started to read Lincoln. So this is what Lincoln says in the second inaugural. Yet, if God wills that the Civil War continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsmen, the slaves, 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk. That is to say, now my paraphrase of his brilliant prose, if the Civil War continues to the point that all the unearned wealth that we acquired through slavery will be squandered because of the war, will be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash, every drop of blood that was drawn with the slave driver's lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword. That means for all the blood of African Americans that was spilt by the slave driver, if all that blood was then paid back with all the deaths in the Civil War, and it was 700,000 deaths, he says, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. I would say I'm heading towards 70 years old. That is the single most stirring line I have ever read in my life. Yes. And coming from Abraham Lincoln, if all the money we extracted unfairly from those slaves for 250 years, and all the blood that was spilt by the slaves due to the slave driver's lash, if all of that is lost, because now it's Americans, whites, who are dying in the Civil War, 700,000, not a small number. He said, it's still worth it because it's right to end the slavery. It's the moral sentiment combined with the prose. There is an awful lot in that one sentence, And then to reduce the magnitude of what's going on in that one sentence to just hurling a label, racist. is that history? It's just stupid. It's
The
just stupid.
the last line is reminiscent of Herman Melville's Moby Dick. The final line there, the great shroud of the sea rolled on as it did 5,000 years ago. Just to like dwell just a tiny bit more on Stamped.
That may have been an impact because Melville was very influential.
He might not actually have, because Melville went through a period where his last 20 years of life, everything that he wrote was out of print, including Moby Dick. Nobody really knew him that well until the 1920s.
It was known, I think it was known that he was a public defender of John Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So that aspect of Melville, I don't know. Look, I'm completely speculating, but that aspect may have been known. In any case, there are spectacular moments. Listen, you can say 10,000 things about Martin Luther King, but I think that last speech he gave on April 3rd, 1968, that speech on the eve of his assassination, I think that's the greatest speech ever given in human history. I do. I've talked to many people about that. There's nothing really that compares to it. That last speech, I still tear up, and I must have listened to it 100 times. But he was a very flawed vessel, and he was the first. Martin Luther King was consumed. He was eaten away by guilt because he had a very promiscuous private life. It was known because his phones were tapped by the FBI. The FBI blackmailed him, or attempted to blackmail him, with that information. And he was consumed by guilt because he felt he didn't deserve all the praise that was being heaped on him. And he felt he was a very flawed human being. And he was. We're all flawed, as Dr. West says, cracked vessels. But can you deny his greatness in the face of that? No. Does hurling the label racist, or in this case, the label of adulterer, does that capture his whole life? No.